I heard it wasn't minutes night. I don't know.
This is Damian Macy, representing the Friends of the Marshall Public Library and our Oral History Project. Today is Tuesday, November the 10th of 2015, and I am at the library with Charlotte Morecraft. We're really going to be talking about Main Street, its origination, and some of the places that took place after that, some of the things that happened. Charlotte was deeply involved, and we are going to kind of have a joint interview explaining how did that Main Street program get started. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Charlotte Morecraft and let her start.
Okay. After I was elected to the city council, the mayor had asked me, called me in his office, and I'd only been in, I went in April, and it was during the summer. There was a meeting down at Carbondale about the Main Street program. And he'd been wanting to get somebody involved, but he didn't really feel he had anyone on the council before that was interested. Well, fortunately, my friend Joyce Murphy, who was president of the Chamber of Commerce, knew about the Main Street program and had already been talking to me that Marshall needed to have that.
And Charlotte, you might just mention who was the mayor at that time.
Oh, and the mayor was Richard Smintley, commonly called Dick.
Mm-hmm.
So he had said there was this meeting and would I be available to go, and which I have always been a person that could go to any place like that at about any time. So we made the arrangements, and Pat McCammon, I asked her to go with me because I knew through our working together on things she would be very interested. And then Doris Hartwell at that time was president of the Chamber of Commerce. So then she also went with us, and we went to Carbondale. No, she didn't go with us. Doris Hartwell didn't go on that trip. She went on a different one. But it was Patty and I. And so we were just so inspired when we came home with the information that we got, and the director, Felicia Crisafoli, and she was just a very vibrant person. And one of the things that she mentioned, and in starting out, we got a lot of information, was you start out small. Don't plan on any great big things. Just start with small projects, but do them often. So when I came back home, I was so excited. So at my the council meeting, I was to report what I'd learned. Well, first thing, none of the men had heard of a Main Street program. They had been very involved in getting businesses and things at the interstate of Route 1 and Route 70. But really, downtown was taken for granted. It was there. We already had it all this time.
And Charlotte, if I'm just back up here a little bit, the Main Street program is a sponsored function within each town, yes. But it is directed and kind of starts at the national trust
yes.
level in Washington. So it does have a pyramid at the top.
Definitely. And so at the council meeting, I gave a short report of what I had heard and what they had done. And truthfully, I probably could have talked to this table and got about as much response. The only response I got, and I tried to talk about tourism and that, we don't want to have a Branson, Missouri. We don't want anything like that here. And so I kind of was a little disheartened, but I thought, we're going to do it. And I was so inspired, so I kind of worked at talking to some different people in town, and Damien happened to be one. And so we just decided maybe we would start this anyway.
And as far as I recall, I think we were determined enough to say this idea or this concept is good enough. Well, whether we're even accepted or not, let's do it as our own function in Marshall.
Project. So after we had kind of formed our group, and So then we decide we need to have a public meeting. Thinking if we were lucky, we probably had about 15 volunteers at that point. If we were lucky, we might get 15 or maybe 20 at the very most if some of the council persons came to come to our first meeting. So there wasn't any need to make arrangements for a real big place because there wasn't going to be many of us here. Well, we made arrangements at a Mars Furniture Store, which is a big building, has a lot of furniture in it though. Well, just by chance, the day before, I thought, I need to contact the television station. It just happened that the director of the Channel 10 lived in Marshall, and I knew him from other projects, so I said, could you send some people over? Don't worry, we will be there. We will stay the entire time. So the night of the meeting, Damien, how many people do you think we had?
I think it was just a little over 100, wasn't it?
I think close to
112 or something kind of sticks in my mind.
I think so.
And it was an enthusiastic group, too.
Yes. And it wasn't only downtown building owners. In fact, I'm not sure. At that meeting, I know there were some. I know for our first year at least, none of our active members owned a business downtown.
I was in business, but I did not own the buildings.
Yeah. But one of the things that we started, we would look, and of course we did some small things, like washing windows. We had a day of washing downtown windows, and especially of the empty buildings.
And also, some of this organization kind of took place, as I recall, not too long before Fall Festival.
Yes.
And we had rakes and hoses and blowers, leaf blowers and everything, and cleaned up the downtown area.
Yes, we did. And sometimes little Cub Scouts would help too. And I know one day I had some on a Saturday, and we were sweeping. They were doing some street sweeping, and we had brooms and things for them. And these little boys were so appalled because on the sidewalk and the gutter right outside of the taverns were all these cigarette butts. And, and I was impressed that little 8 and 9-year-olds, because they were little boys, that they knew that wasn't right. People should not do that. But it seemed like as we went along, and one of the things that we had that we decided for our first project that we would ask for any money for was trash receptacles. Because what we had were bright red barrels with a black plastic bag hanging over the side.
As I recall, some of those had kind of begun to rust also.
They were in bad shape. So this was our first financial project that we were going to ask the council to help us with. Well, when first asked, brought it up, and something that I was advised after a couple times of asking for things or doing with these guys, men, one of the city manager, or city, George Smith, whatever his job was.
Director of Utilities.
Yes.
Something else.
Who was
General Works.
Had the political savvy, said, now Charlotte, I want to tell you something. Next time when you want to ask for anything from these people, you get Damien Macy and some of the people that are well known and are supporting you, you get them to that meeting. This will make a big difference. And he was right. It did help to have somebody other than just me, this lady who was talking to them about something they really didn't think needed anything done with it anyway.
Well, I think the opinion that, at least in some of my early encounters, several people in town said, oh, something like this has been tried before. And yeah, well, there's no use trying it again because it's just not going to work. So there was a little bit of a cloud in there, I think, sticking in people's minds from some earlier experiences. And it was just hard to kind of break through that we can do it.
Well, then one thing then that did help, and it kind of helped on open the eyes of the city fathers too, the Western Auto Store became available, and our library had outgrown its building, and it was right next door to our existing library, and so the city decided they would purchase that building and expand our library. So the downtown people got hope. They
You
knew
recall what
the
year
city
that
cared.
was?
Well, I went in 95. It was the first year. It was
Okay.
it was the same year, 94. I was elected. No, 95, because I ran again in 1999.
Yeah, I couldn't
So
recall
it would have
exactly.
been 95.
5.
And so then, before I was even installed, there was a library meeting here at the library of the board, of the council persons that were on the library committee and the library board and others about this building, and they had already purchased it, but what were they going to do with the building? So I'm sitting here and they're talking about lowering the ceiling in there, which we had a tour of it when we were first there and had this beautiful antique ceiling, metal ceiling with wide cornices around. And I'm just thinking, and I mean, had been so pleased and glad that this is what they had and were going to use.
Why cover it up?
That's right. So in sitting there, and Bear Clapfelder kind of was my mentor. He was very supportive of it, and of course he was with building. At that time, my husband was building a large addition to the nursing home. And there was an architect from Jacksonville, Illinois, who I had been up at his office in order to deliver some papers. And he had restored his office in an old building, plus had restored the train station there too. So, and his wife had a restaurant in it. And a kind of cute thing was, she was an Italian lady and her name was Italian. Well, he didn't let her name it with her married name, but it was in her maiden name, in case it failed. But the things I asked, and I know it had to be coming direct from above, because one reason they were going to lower it was because it would be cheaper to heat the building. And my question was, do you have those figures? Well, no. Well, they didn't intend to use the upper floor. And so I said, well, couldn't you put insulation up there then and be able to use that? And there was one other thing too. And so and I kind of whispered to Mr. Clapfelder, Bear, I said, could we get Mike down here? Well, Charlotte, he's coming tomorrow. He's coming to the nursing home job. And yes, I'm sure he'll be glad to come. So on the next day he came, Bear was here, and Jim Swartz, he was the council person. And and the heating, that was the other thing, because of the heat. And they would use the tubes for the heating, which is what you do in older buildings now, I have found out then. Well, they didn't know about that either, several, but this was what he suggested. He inspected the building, and because we had to open a door between the two buildings, and we had to have an architect's approval on that for our plans anyway, so he just took over. But these things, so then I got real busy and I thought, those guys didn't want me anyway. I had kind of gone in the place of a council person who, was one of the clique, but he worked away, and he was never at the meetings. Well, that's really why I ran. I kind of wanted to be involved, but it's like, that's not right. He's never there to mow. However, after I filed my petition in January, between January and April, he never missed a council meeting. But I forgot. Oh, but then, so Mr. Goldlish came and gave us that. I forgot what else I was going to say. You better talk now. I get my brain in gear.
So this, an improvement of this building was, I think, a big step to the community too. That people said, by golly, there really is something happening downtown.
Yes.
Do you think maybe that was kind of the spark, or maybe the bridge that helped
Definitely.
Move things along?
Definitely. And when we were starting to do some painting of the library, we did paint one building. The person, business owner across the street, who in my mind I knew would be the very last one to ever do anything, had contacted our local painter, who was a young man and had very good color sense, and he also had a very persuasive way to talk people into painting colors that worked.
Tim? Is that Tim?
Yeah, Tim Bloodworth, yes. And so he had him come over. In our first, and during this time, right after that, we got a visit from the State Main Street people. They happened to be down south at some of the other towns, and I had been in contact with them by the phone, often, very often. But at that point, because of needing support from the city, from the downtown or public, and there's three things. I just knew we weren't ready yet to file an application at that time. So, but being as we had talked so much, they just stopped by and visited Marshall and made arrangements to meet us. Well, during that first year, after we'd started the library, we had 23 buildings painted. I would visit with the contractor or the painter, and he always would hire a lift when he was going to do a building, and he wanted to have at least 3. So I had talked to him this morning, and I was going to Terre Haute, and he told me the 3 he was painting, and I came home, and he wasn't on any of those 3. He was on another one, and he had gotten 2 more jobs that day. So we were really we were doing all the things at Main Street. We had also gone to some of the meetings before we actually applied. The second year, when we were ready and had things in place, they had taken in so many communities the year before that they couldn't service them well.
I might add, you mentioned the lady way back, but from this point forward, she was very important to us, was Valicia Christofoli.
Yes.
I think she was one of the most dynamic people, very down to earth, not high pressure, not steamroller, but she had great ideas and she knew how to present them. And I really think she could probably have sold a deep freeze to an Eskimo.
I know she could.
And it was that nature that was really permeating all the Main Street program from the state.
Oh, definitely.
It was an exciting thing. It was uplifting. And I know she brought a lot of towns into the fold.
Definitely.
And I think we were quite disappointed when that application went through, and it was a rather extensive amount of paperwork, and had to have a commitment by the city, and so many people, I think, signed a petition-like thing. And to not get it honored that first year, they said, they had so many in, she said.
Yeah, that's right, we had to wait.
It was a quota type of thing.
Yeah, this was the second.
And they were
year.
maxed out, so
Yeah.
we had kind of a disappointing thing, but I don't think that dampened anyone's spirits, because we kept moving right along and said, well, we're going to do it. We'll do it whether they will sanction us or not.
Well, and they did give us the same services had we been a community. I mean, because they had sent an architect down for us from them, although we weren't approved yet when Anthony came. we had everything except we just didn't have, and we went to the conventions. Really, we had everything, but we just didn't have the name yet. But it is.
And I think that was, again, a personal thing. Valicia saw what was happening in Marshall. She had confidence in Marshall, and that's why we went ahead with it too, I think, because we thought we had her back, that she would support us when the time came for that final application.
And back to the tin ceiling, I remembered what I forgot. You know, when I got home, and I was thinking, that is gorgeous. Now, I know these ladies that live in the north part of town, and one of them was on the library board. They would want that kept because they lived in great, big, beautiful old houses. So I called two of them and just kind of put a bug in their ear of what was going to happen at the library with that beautiful ceiling. And then I also called a company that did metal ceilings, and I got the prices of how much that would have cost in order to get that kind of ceiling. And I also then got a price from a local contractor how much it would cost to do the suspended ceiling. Now these were things, you know, I probably had not done that type of thing before, but you know, it worked. And not only did we then, the older part of the library, it had the ceilings lowered, and we didn't have that in our plan to take that away, but sitting on the stairway one day in the back, George Smith pointed out to me, because you could tell with work, Charlotte, you see that underneath? That building, that one's got this ceiling too. And so I had to go back to the council again to ask more money. And this was kind of hard to do, but they were a lot more were more tuned in by this point. And because we had to pay them to have higher ceiling, more painted, plus the ceilings. And they tore out the old, and so we have beautiful ceilings in both rooms.
Do you recall what that dollar amount was for the value of that ceiling that was in there?
Something was around $17,000. Now, I don't know if that was the value of that ceiling or if that was the suspended. I can't remember. I don't know.
With all of that space, that seemed
I would almost think that
sounds low.
17,000 was if they did a suspended ceiling, and the other was more. But, and one of the councilmen who from that part of town, and he ended up being on this committee and was very good on the building committee for the library. But he kind of looked at me, came to me, and he said, "You did a pretty good job, Charlotte." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" "Well, got 14 or 15 calls today about that ceiling downtown." And it really built respect for me then from the men, because they'd only had once before a lady council person, and well, she was a little different gender than me, I think.
Well, I think that shows too that sometimes just one or two people on an idea, and if it's valid and you can document and reason why, it can be convincing.
Yeah, it worked. Yeah, it worked.
There wasn't any involvement of Main Street in the improvement of the library at all, was there? I mean, other than your personal cross between the two.
Yeah, other than me getting in my picture about every week and making the other council person not too happy, because they appointed me then the project chairman for this building. And so I thought, I don't know about that. So I talked to my husband, who is the builder, and had done buildings, both state and federal grant type. So he was familiar, and he said, "It's okay, I'll help you out with some things you need. If you need anything, you can ask me." And truthfully, on part of it, he knew more than the local people that were doing it, because he'd done it before. But
With you mentioned the 23 buildings and all, and those people did all of that on their own dollars too.
Yes.
There was no grants or anything available at that time, as I recall. So everyone paid their own bill for doing their building. And I think that not only got the attention of local people, hey, here's something happening, but other towns not too far away from here, Paris, Terre Haute even, said, hey, things are changing over Marshall.
Yeah, definitely.
And for the better.
Well, and TRW is our largest manufacturer, and we talked to them too for support. And one of the things they told me at the time was, well, when we have new people coming, we direct them through the downtown. Said, there's other ways you can get here to get to our building. 2 or 3 choices you didn't, but we direct them through our downtown now. And they did give us a large donation. They did up on the courthouse square.
I think you and I went down one time and talked to the plant manager.
Yes.
After that, finally did get some pesos.
I don't know what it was, but it was several thousands of dollars.
I think it was $2,500.
Maybe.
Kind of sticks in my mind, but I'm not real sure. Well, Charlotte, coming back to our plan of this Main Street objective and being a member officially of the Main Street program, we passed that first year, was it in 1996 or 7, when the final application was made and approved?
97.
97, that's what I thought.
Yeah, because
And we had also that time had to have some, I guess, commitment for dollars.
yes.
And it did take the city's approval that they would, as the program called for, about 1/3 of the program budget of the Main Street program for Marshall would come from the city, 1/3 from dues and membership type of thing. Not really dues, but membership and paying for donations. And then another 1/3 would be from fundraisers and things that we would do within our own organization. Did we have a kind of a kickoff celebration for that? I don't honestly recall. I know we had, I think, a meeting at City Hall. The new City Hall was built by that time.
Yeah.
And we had,
Yeah, because see, it was built at the same time we were doing this.
we had our meeting there, and I believe that was kind of a kickoff thing with, with the recognition maybe of the mayor, and I believe that was Bloodworth at that time then. Had become mayor.
Yeah, probably. I don't know for sure. Probably.
But I think that was a total, I guess, a new concept. People just, it took some education
Well,
and a lot of news articles and one-on-one, getting around to talk to people. Here's what we're doing, what we're planning.
well, and one of the things they had suggested that you do something every month that is publicized. It doesn't have to be a big major thing, but you do something every month and you do it well. So we did do something. Another thing that happened to us along the way, a bank had been torn down on the square, and it was just this empty, ugly lot.
With bricks strewn all over those remaining lots.
And so, you know, in our showing off our what had been done, making walking tours with people. The kids came from school uptown. We did tours with them. We had business people come. It was like when we got to this ugly spot. So then we got the idea, you know, maybe we could do something with this. And so we talked to the owner of the lot, and yes, he would continue to pay the taxes and the insurance, and if we wanted to put some grass or do something there, it would be all right. Well, we decided maybe we needed a little bit of help in our planning. So we had a landscape architect come from the Apple House in Terre Haute, and we told him, said, now probably our plantings we would do ourselves, but we will promise what we buy, we will buy from you. Well, he came up with ideas like a wrought iron fence and an arbor in there. We really, you know, and the man that owned the lot, Mr. Bernardoni, he just thought we were going to plant some grass and maybe put a couple of tables. well, he just had such good ideas. So then one of our members, and no, she wasn't a member, but she was very involved in helping us, was Wanda Spittler. Well, I had gone to visit Wanda at the hospital, and she was very near her death. And she had told me, and thank goodness her daughter was standing out in the hall and heard her say the part, "Now, Charlotte, I want the donations for me to go to," which her daughter didn't hear this part, but it was to the downtown park. And so when I came out of the room, her daughter said, what did Mom tell you that she wanted that? And I said, well, she wanted to go to the park. Well, it just happened that her son-in-law did things with wrought iron and made wrought iron fences. So it was, what was more perfect than to do this fence? And he made it cost just what our donation was, which I'm sure it should have been more.
Stretched it.
So then another thing that we able to do, to have a brick sidewalk, Jack Huffington owned still land on Old 40 that had the brick.
Okay.
So we went out with the trailer and several men, and one of them had brought his nephew with him, a teenager, and got the bricks out of there, and then had it for the brick walk. The city built our pergola for us. They did that.
Was there already a water line there that we were able to use? Because the water, there is a spigot there.
Yeah, I would imagine.
With city water.
Yeah, because it would have been there for the bank.
For the bank.
I think it probably had water there.
So they would have just extended it out
Yeah,
so
and
that you
had
could
to
have
put
access
the
to
spigot
it.
in. Yeah, I think, yeah.
That created kind of a stir, as I recall, too, that while that was taking place, and I think people walking by said, "What are you doing walking around a bunch of old bricks like that?" And I think people finally said, "Hey, what are these folks really up to?"
Yeah, it kind of, the things that really fell in our lap gave us an opportunity to
And I don't recall
get
that
recognition.
park was, I guess, really an early concept of the Main Street. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
it was. It was
It was
us.
sponsored by Main Street, but didn't the Garden Club or one of the
The garden club said they would maintain it.
Maintain
They
it,
would take
okay.
care of the
I
flowers.
couldn't recall what their
Yeah.
commitment was.
Yeah, they would take care of the flowers. And then for the benches, we got donations, and then there would be a plaque for the person, their family would, that donated for the bench.
And that has been well maintained over the years too. I mean, it wasn't just an idea that molded afterwards. It has really
Garden
been,
Club's still doing it.
it's still very much a vital part of the downtown.
And now the township has purchased a building that was adjoining that, which had no back door. And they didn't have a place to put a back door because they had buildings on each side of them. So they purchased the downtown park, and so now it is owned by Marshall Township.
Well, it definitely is.
Yeah, it's owned by Marshall Township now.
Because there was a building that was back, the brick wall that the park backs up to is no longer there because that was the old candy kitchen.
Yeah, well, that's on the
Which-
back of it,
right,
but this
which,
other, the township building's
Right,
on the,
which is gone.
yeah, and it's gone. But that was, and they, fire laws were obligated to have a back door. Now, it had been business ever since it was built in 19 whatever, and there wasn't any back door, but
I
since
think
they,
even late 1800s.
and so since they were a public entity especially, so now they, and they've helped out some with things there, I think.
With that development of the park as a Main Street function, I think we even used the term Main Street, but I don't believe we had our charter.
Yeah.
Did we have our
I
charter?
think we
then?
did by then, But we had a plaque, and the city marshal helped us some too, and they brought in some, did that pergola. So on the recognition on the plaque, it was the owner, Marshall Main Street,
Okay.
City of Marshall, and whatever else I said.
The garden.
And the garden, Marshall Garden Club. And then recognition was, well, now since the ownership has changed, the plaque is not there, I noticed. But city really has nothing to do with it now either, because it's there.
It would been, I think, been logical to keep the plaque up there, and then
Well,
that's where it started.
I thought so too, but it's not there.
With the, I guess that kind of being the seed of the Main Street thing, what, I think we established regular monthly meetings. And I think most of those, well, I think they were all primarily held at City Hall. You remember who the first officers elected were?
Me, you.
Well, you were president, and I was elected treasurer.
Yeah.
I honestly am not recalling right now who was vice president and who was secretary. I think Karen Cowan, was she secretary?
I don't know. It doesn't sound like what something Karen would do.
No,
I don't know.
I could be wrong on that.
I don't know.
But also with the Main Street program, there was not only a board required, but there were also operating and functional committees. One of them was a design committee,
Yeah.
one of them was economic development, one of them was publicity, and restructuring, I believe, was the other one.
Maybe restoration or something. I can't think.
But anyway, those committees then, right almost at the start, there were volunteers, and people volunteered for every one of those functions.
Yes.
So we had functioning and operating committees just almost from day one.
Yeah.
And they met pretty much,
Yeah.
I think, just about every month also,
I think so too.
and then reported at the general meeting.
Meeting.
And I think what I was always impressed with, really that first year, my land, people attended very generously in those meetings and participated. I think we usually had, 70, 60, 70, 100, well, not maybe 100, but anywhere from 50 to 75 people at most of the early meetings.
Yeah, we had a lot. Yeah.
But those meetings also, there was an agenda, there was a planning, it was conducted on a business basis, and I think people felt things are happening.
Well, yes,
And it wasn't just a meeting, that's my
and
point.
what they could see, yeah, they could see there were things to
Really
do.
going on.
And one of the things that we initiated was bringing young children, classes, downtown and taking them and had tours. We had different people at different buildings that talked with them.
And then May generally is, well, from the National Trust, is National Preservation Month. And that's when we usually coordinated the visits with, especially bringing the children downtown, letting them draw chalk buildings on the sidewalk and take them through different buildings. And I think the kids really look forward to that.
Oh.
We had some other strange things too, I guess. We had a history contest one time with pictures of different artifacts of the front of the building or the side of the building, and put those in the paper, and people had to determine where those pieces of architecture were located. And then I think we had a drawing, we had several winners.
Yeah.
I think we did a drawing then for the person that
Well,
had most of them.
and that one thing that helped some of our publicity was because of the band concert being in Marshall on Friday nights, all during the summer months, and that was where we had our drawing, was at the band concert, because we knew everybody would be there and it would draw attention. Another thing, a lucky thing that happened to us, and this came through the Main Street program, was the Chautauqua. I was in one day with talking to our director, making plans, and we received a call from Springfield, and would we be interested in having a Chautauqua? Truthfully, neither one of us really were quite sure what the Chautauqua was. But when they described, they had actors who would be coming, staying in our town and performing. They would have their own sound system, their own tent. And really, we didn't even ask anybody else. We just said yes. And that helped validate the Main Street program too.
Charlotte, I want to back up just a little bit. With the development of the program, and really starting off very soon afterwards, we had our officers, we had our committees. We had to figure out a place to make our office because we needed some central spot.
Yes.
We rented the one of the suites or the offices in the Chamber of Commerce building.
Yes.
It was one of the larger ones, and they made a very nice office, publicly located. And we had to hire a director also.
Yes.
As I recall, we interviewed several people and selected one. As a matter of fact, it's the one that you mentioned went to one of the meetings with you.
Yes,
Was Pat McCammon. And she was very enthusiastic, had a lot of ideas, and really helped with, I think, with our PR.
Well, and she had really good business sense. Sure. She had owned a business, had knowledge of structure that you needed in an office.
And I think the fact that she was well known in the community, that helped too, that she wasn't talking off the cuff. She knew what she was saying. And really, I think, helped convince a lot of people that the program was something that was going to help the city.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think that central location also being right downtown and in the Chamber of Office?
Well, yes.
Had some help also?
Yes, because, if you're promoting downtown, if you had your office in the city hall or someplace else, that's not promoting what you're doing. What you're doing.
And I recall shortly after we really got started, I think it was the park, didn't the Terre Haute Chamber of Commerce recognize the Marshall Main Street with one of their, a rather large award and recognition anyway for what we were doing?
We had entered both our park and also the library.
Okay.
And we won the award for both of them, one on the building structure and the other for the park. And I had taken the pictures with my camera, which, it's an okay camera, and was so flattered when the man at, starts with the G, the photo.
Galloway's?
Yeah, Galloway's, called his partner over and said, I want you to see how distinct this photograph is. You can see the mortar, the bricks. I'm thinking, okay, I did buy my camera from you, but but we did win in both of those categories. One was the building restoration, and the other, the park, a community project that we've done.
You mentioned going to meetings and all. At that time, Main Street had some very dynamic speakers when they had a conference, and they always had an annual meeting or convention, I believe they called it, of really requesting attendance from
we were
Main Street
required
members
to have a certain amount of people there.
And those were, I think, a real inspiration. And the fact that we had pretty much support of the city council, but I believe, Charlotte, you convinced our Mayor Bloodworth at that time, and his wife to attend one of the conventions. And I believe that really opened the floodgates of interest.
It really did, and we also paid for this for him rather than asking his city budget. In fact, Patty and I had come downstairs to go into the coffee shop, and Alicia was there, and she said to us, your mayor is so proud and so excited about the Main Street program. And we looked at each other like,
did you get the right guy?
Our mayor? Well, he had been in the meeting of mayors, and she was in the meeting. And as other mayors and people were talking, the light came on in his brain of all that we were doing that they weren't. And from then on, he was a great supporter, but he was a little bit hard in the beginning. But when she told us that, we were kind of like,
Well, I know Pat mentioned this too, that so many things we were talking about or thinking about here had already been done or tried in another city. And she developed a great pipeline talking to other Main Street managers, and it was a great resource to pass things by them. Here's what we're thinking about doing. And I know she did a lot of cross work and really helped her out. She always said, well, why reinvent the wheel if someone else has already done it?
Well, and by going to these meetings, we learned so much what other places were doing. And things that we could.
And I know the conventions that I went to, you always came home with something as, boy, I didn't know that before. It was something that really inspired you to take this back home
we
and
can
try it
do
or do
this.
it. And we usually did things like that.
Well, and one of the things that we learned about was the program of streetscapes. And so we worked toward this, and this was another thing that was a little bit difficult to sell in the beginning until it discovered how much help there was for us. And so when we did our Main Street, and the city at that time also did the infrastructure for the storm sewer and replaced the water line that had been there since 1910. And of course that was added into the streetscape project. But always when it was noted how much was spent on the streetscape, they included that stuff too.
Charlotte, I think for the benefit of people listening, we'll elaborate a little bit on what the streetscape was.
Okay.
That word could be construed to be a lot of different things, but it was included here at least, new sidewalks on both sides of Archer Avenue. And we selected a border right up close to the street, a brick. It included new street lights. And we finally convinced the city to take the wiring away from those ugly poles in the street and put it underground. And then also it included some new benches.
And trees.
And some new garbage receptacles.
Yes.
And that was where you started with the ugly garbage receptacle.
Yeah.
So these things were all coordinated. And I don't think even most people in town realized it, but that design in the brick, the street lights, all of those were done and selected by Main Street people, Main Street Committee. There was a grant, I think it was called ICE-T grant, and I forget now that stands for something. It was through the Department of Transportation. There were federal funds being made available. We applied and were granted the money to do the streetscape. But we were able to pick all those things out, and then working with the architect from Springfield, I think he's from Springfield. And he was down here every few weeks and worked with us. And I know our design committee was deeply involved, and we got streetlight maps of other towns and how they spaced them. Then we got catalogs of what the streetlights looked like. And I think he made some studies of lumens and all, how much the old lights put out and what new lights could do for us. So we had a lot of help from other places, but all of that really generated by Main Street.
Well, and it not only did the first phase that did just our Main Street, then we were eligible and we applied for a second phase.
Well, I'll go back. We applied for the whole thing, which included the second phase at one time, but there weren't enough dollars.
That's right.
So they just allotted us enough dollars to do Archer Avenue, not around the courthouse.
Yeah, that's right.
But a lot of the drawings and the work and all had already been done.
Yes, it had already been done.
And then, of course, when they did the second phase here really 2 years ago, and finished up last year, they obviously did the same pattern with the brick and the street lights and all. So it was still a Main Street function.
Well, and
made that possible.
And it was kind of a function that probably the city wouldn't have even known about had it not been through the Main Street program. And another thing that you sometimes find out in going to the state meetings, which some people I know think it's all just a party and you're wasting, but another thing that happened to me when I had gone to, and this was for the city council, but it was a state meeting in Springfield, and I went to the meeting that was on recycling. thinking they meant recycling plastic bags and whatever, which that was part of it. But the main thing that I picked up was recycled tires, and they were being used for playgrounds and for new tracks, for high school track. What just happened, our school was in the process of inquiring about building a new track. So I got this one-page application, took it to our school superintendent, he passed it on to the coach, and the city received $90,000 toward the new track. Didn't know about this before. School didn't know about the availability either.
Well, I thought it was rather unusual. You mentioned earlier, the city council is just kind of lukewarm on so many of these things, and finally got interested. But I found a while back, going through some old files, and I found a newspaper, and we had been to city council making some of this original plan of what we're wanting to do about streetscape. And the city council, I think, finally got interested. But in the city council meeting, it was approved to have Pat McCammon as our manager apply for the grant. So
right.
it was all Main Street that got the thing going.
Yes, we did it.
And of course, that attitude and I guess interest has changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. And we had, as I recall, a Governor's Hometown Award too.
Yes, we did.
So we had not just recognition of people within the county or within the town, but Wabash Valley from the Terre Haute and also from Springfield. There was quite an interest through Velicia's work, historic preservation. You mentioned Anthony Rubano, who was a big help and a really devoted person, just loved Marshall. Big interest from them. And they were a great resource when people were thinking about doing a building. The program would provide a drawing, an architectural rendering of their building and what they would recommend to paint, improve. And we'd had several people do those.
Yes,
and most of them were done and accomplished.
Yeah.
And that was worth several $1,000s. That there was no charge to the community or to the person. So that was a tremendous resource to have. No longer available.
No, not now.
In your tenure as president and all, do you recall of other significant things that we accomplished? We just did an awful lot.
Yeah, we did. Well, I can't.
And we can't mention all of them, but I know. And, I guess we just can kind of look around town and see the buildings. I remember right across the street, going to work one morning, going to my office, and I pulled up here at the stoplight. The town was loaded with fire trucks and all, and I looked over, and there were flames coming out of the second floor window of Nancy's
up there, the next block.
art shop. I thought, oh my Lord, it was just totally devastating.
Yeah.
And the fire trucks, and fortunately, we've got a wonderful volunteer department. They got the fire out. It had started and pretty well burned out the second floor. Did not even get through the roof.
Yeah.
But tremendous water came through in the downstairs. I was talking to Nancy, and she said, she was just moving right ahead. She was going to replace, she was going to redo. She had talked to Terry Stevens. She'd even ordered new carpet. This was that afternoon. I said, Nancy, let's just check things out here a little bit first. So anyway, she had some people pull up the old carpet, and sure enough, under it were original encaustic tile on that whole floor. And the carpet had been glued to it. So it was just a mass of glue. You probably remember looking into that. It was a terrible looking mess. And of course with the water, and it was finally cleaned up. And she said, I'm glad I ordered carpet. I just cover up this whole mess. I said, Nancy, do you really think we ought to do that? Would you give me 2 hours? Well, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to take a long lunch hour and I'm going to see what this floor really looks like. And stop back about 2 o'clock. So I got some solvents, I don't remember what it was, and a putty knife and steel wool, and cleaned about a 3 by 3 foot patch, which took forever because that old glue was tough. And it was gorgeous. There was, I think, one crack across the floor, and she had said, oh, it's all cracked up, it's just not worth saving. I said, well, and anyway, she came back at 2 o'clock, and I think Pat came over and some others from the city, and were totally shocked. Because the tile, again, that just doesn't wear out. And I can't remember now who all, Nancy's husband at that time, Ron Howe, got a buffer from the school. We put steel wool on it. And then several other people, mostly volunteers
Yeah, I
from Main
missed
Street.
out. I wasn't here I wasn't in Marshall that day, so I missed out of the work. When I got there, I just got to see the beautiful floor.
Most of the volunteers, I think, were Main Street. But John Tress, I think, came down, got someone else from the city. And it took a whole afternoon, but by golly, the next day, it was all finished. Well, Nancy was still worried she'd ordered carpet. I said, Nancy, I don't want to get into business, but you can see what we've got here. Why don't you talk to Terry and just say, hey, even if you pay the installation cost, he's still got the carpet, there's no cutting of it or anything. I'll bet he'll work with you. Anyway, she went out and talked to him. He said, oh, yeah. So it was that benefit of a local business. It was a benefit to her. We got the floor cleaned up for her, and I think it's still open today.
Yeah, she's still open.
And that original floor that was put down when the building was built,
Isn't that great?
probably prior to 1900. I don't know what that age was. And now, it wasn't through Main Street necessarily, but through Main Street's involvement, I'm going to come back to the design committee. We developed files. There is a folder for every downtown building on Archer Avenue. We determined what the Main Street district was, and it covered from Route 1 to not quite to 5th Street. The alley, I think,
Yeah, past
between
5th Street. We did 5th Street. Not to
4th.
Yeah.
There was, I think, at the alley. But anyway, there's a folder developed for every one of those buildings. When we first got started, we had a couple volunteers to take pictures, and we made up a form. There's kind of a little bit of history about that building, the rough size, what was in there, maybe who owned it, anything we could find out, the approximate time it was built. So those folders are still, and I don't know if they're maintained today or not, but are still in Main Street.
Main Street.
And then when we wanted to make really a presentation and a final bid to become a National Historic District downtown, those folders were the valuable resource
Oh, yeah.
to make the National Register nomination, which we had a contract with the young lady from Terre Haute. who
So
actually
did we
the
get
rest.
that accomplished?
Yes.
Do we
Yeah.
have a sign anywhere that says that?
Unfortunately, no. That's another story.
Okay.
But anyway, the downtown, basically the historic district is that original Main Street district.
Okay.
It includes the entire courthouse square
Uh-huh.
and out to Route 1 and to the alley,
Yeah,
or the area just a little bit past 5th Street.
okay.
And Kim Smith did the National Register nomination form for us.
Okay.
It was contract, but I was able, through Historic Preservation Commission in Springfield, get a grant to do that. So it was several thousand, it was $8,000 plus. And we got the grant to do that, so there wasn't any cost to the city. even to
Well,
do
you
that.
know, there are amazing things available if you just search.
Have to do a little digging
And
sometimes.
now I think with internet, it probably is easier to find some of these things than it would have been in the past. Maybe not.
I guess the whole problem is now, compared to at least 1997 or even up to 2000, state, federal, everything, there's just no grants.
Yeah.
I mean, they have just really, just totally almost dried up.
Yeah.
So there's still probably a few things around, but for many government work, they're just, pesos aren't there.
Well, you know, something I've kind of wondered as we were talking, how Main Street now is able to have the $500 grant for someone that paints a building.
It's 1,000 now.
1,000? I didn't know about that. I thought it was 5.
I think they pushed it up.
Okay. But I mean, I'm glad they are able to finance it. I'm thrilled to death, but I just didn't know.
And the city is still providing, I think, a pretty nice chunk of their annual funding.
Well,
But I've gotten away from it. Our
me
design
too.
committee operated we had a meeting 10 times a year, every month, up until just about a year ago. And the two people who had been chairman of it for several years just said, we've got other things. We need a new chairman, and I'm sorry, but the board and all at that time just kind of weakened, and no one seemed to take anything by the horns. So I don't think any of those 4 functioning committees today are operating, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. And of course, we don't know, I mean, since it's from the state levels, it's changed. We're not getting that help and supervision. They probably don't know and don't care.
But there used to be hourly reports of hours volunteered in the community.
Yeah.
And the director was to send those every month up to Springfield, and that was something that was required.
Yes, it was.
But it's kind of evaporated from the top. The National Trust still maintains a very active Main Street program.
Yeah.
And some
But it's
states are
just-
very, very active.
It's just the state of Illinois isn't now. Well, one thing when they were talking about something that helped solidify us was the Chautauqua. And
Go on a little bit about that. We really didn't.
We had, they had professional actors come, and they brought people here, and they would have a different time period for each year.
Who provided, Humanities Council?
Yes.
Was
yes.
it the actors were from?
Yes,
And they were
yes,
professionals.
and they were professionals. And they came and stayed a week. And here they stayed at the Archer House. Absolutely loved it. And you were supposed to be able to have them every other year. Every 2 years you could have one. Well, we had them 1 year, and then we did wait, I think. And then we did have it in 2 years. Well, the day that they came for the second time, I was at a breakfast at the Archer House, and their director said, we have a thought on the way here, and the actors have something they want us to do, but it's a little bit not regular to do that. But we want to come back here next year. And so we're sitting there, we're just in the very beginning, because this was probably the first day, and everybody's doing things, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, and Pat and I right away said, yes, we will. I'm thinking, I've always kind of read when you have a big event, you brag about the people, you encourage them, but you don't say anything about next year's until you get it over and it's a success. Well, I tell you, I got downtown and I saw Damien. There wasn't any way I was keeping that in my brain. I had to ask him right then, what do you think about it? Well, yes, of course. So there wasn't any question. They came back. And thank goodness they did, because then it was done away with after that.
That program was conducted for Illinois and Missouri, as I recall. And I don't know how many towns in total that were sponsored a Chautauqua, but I believe little old Marshall had the largest attendance of any of their appearances.
And some of them were like Carbondale,
Larger communities.
Jacksonville, a lot larger community than ours.
And the people loved it. Not only our attendance, which is fantastic, it was outside in the tent. We fortunately had wonderful weather. Volunteers helped put up the tent, helped take them down. We had some parties in some homes. We had them in our home one time. And they had loved the Archer House. It was just so quaint, and I don't remember which actor it was, but we had a horse-drawn buggy and take them from the Archer House around town and delivered them at the
Yeah. Do you think it was that Quinn?
tent.
There was a Quinn guy.
Well, yeah, but I can't recall what actor it was
Oh,
or exactly.
no, I don't know either.
And they were so enamored by that my gosh, that thing hadn't happened anyplace else. And then there was someone else, I think the second trip, I got some old car or something. Was it
Yeah.
Henry Ford?
Yes,
actor,
yes,
I
it
think?
was.
And we got some old Model T or something
Ford,
to
yes, to
deliver
take
him.
them, yes.
So those were things that I think Marshall just went above and beyond.
Well, and we took them to our country local moonshine for a moon burger. And, you know, it's just a house in the country, basically, but it's unique and it has thousands of people come. And
From
that
all
was
over the world.
that was one of the places that we took them, and that was on their request list when they came back. Now we want to go. They would go in the daytime, and they went to Burnside's. They gave a program in the park one afternoon, but they did a large outreach. Sometimes they'd have something here in the library.
And I think they made some appearances at the school too, didn't they?
School probably wasn't in session. 'Cause
Well, I mean, at the school building though, I thought they did something in the Performing Arts Center maybe there or something.
I don't
Maybe not, maybe that was here. But it was a community thing.
Yeah.
And we had people not just from Marshall, but we had tremendous attendance from wide area, might say all over the Wabash Valley.
One of the nights, I had one of my grandsons was down here visiting, and he was 8. And then I had his cousin who hung around with him who was 5. Well, they were at the library when the black lady, I can't think of her name.
Sojourner Truth.
Yes, Sojourner Truth, when she spoke, and they were so impressed. Well, then they were downtown, sitting in chairs fairly close to the stage, and were getting ready to get up and probably come back where I was working, selling popcorn or doing something. And it was funny because I could see them, and they were up out of their chair and walked about 2 steps, and they announced who was going to be next, and these little boys just turned and went right back and sat down till they was through. They absolutely loved her, and they wanted to be right there with her.
These characters were dressed in the exact garb and type of thing that would have been at that period, whether it was the Civil War or early 1900s, whatever. And they were in character, and I think that was something that was just totally amazing.
It was.
And then when the program was over, they stepped back out of character and answered questions from the audience. And I thought they just had oodles of questions.
Oh, yeah.
And so wonderful about the way they answered them. And I think that brought the audience in and made them appreciate the actors even more. The tent, do you remember how many people that held? I don't.
250, 300, something
I think,
like that.
yeah. And then we had a lot of chairs set up outside the tent most nights too, and I think they were always full.
Yeah, it really, it was just amazing. And we also, when we first started, thinking probably nobody's going to come anyway because they don't even know what it is we're having, we talked to a couple of the local merchants and got them to buy the food for a free supper, which we served that night. And in our mind, and we kind of made it so it wasn't very long before the program would start, because we wanted, the reason to have a free supper was to get them here. And so I think we continued that on. We had one night, the first night that we had a free supper, the 3 years we had it.
And we had souvenir booklet and the old-fashioned fans.
Yeah.
We had some sponsors who
Well, yes,
helped fund those
when we were
things.
getting funding for that, I just happened to think, the fans, that's something they always had years ago. So when I went to our local funeral director and suggested that that would be good, well, how much do you need, Charlotte? I said, don't know yet, I haven't priced them. Well, whatever it is, we'll take care of it. And so they were very willing to do it, and it was very fitting for the time and the occasion because we were outdoors.
The tent was set up on the courthouse lawn. On the south side, it was a little more open at that time. And I think the fact that that was right in downtown, everyone coming, especially if they're from out of town, came to downtown Marshall. And I think that, again, was a great eye-opener. People could see what the town looked like and what was really being done. It opened a lot of eyes. And I think that brought a lot of attention, too, from people in Springfield. And I know the Humanities Council from Chicago were totally shocked at what had happened in Marshall.
So were we. And I can remember a person who is very negative, always has been, still is, walking away from this event saying, Marshall people aren't smart enough to be able to enjoy something like this. Truthfully, it was a good thing I didn't have a stick or something, but I think he found out that they really were.
And as that Chautauqua started in Chautauqua, New York, there's a town with that name.
Yes.
And it was basically started out kind of religion, but they brought other things into it. It became a cultural experience. And that's exactly what Marshall did.
Yes, and it is, definitely.
Anything else you'd like to say, Charlotte? It's been a delight kind of reminiscing about some of the old...
It has been very reminiscing, and I know Davey and I both are very thrilled that we were able to become a part of this because it was very enriching for us. And it's really nice to come downtown and say, you know, and it's kind of like our library. Darrell Lee Smith had to take off work for a year because she'd had very severe health problems, and she was on the library board, and so I had talked to the board, and I said, I need some more input from board members as to what you want to do, because the men really didn't give me much of a plan or an idea. And so she volunteered, and many of our neat things we have were her ideas. But we worked together wonderfully, and it helped with us. But it also, the library.
Well, I think that same type of concept of working together applied to that original board when we first started Main Street. Everyone brought ideas when we had a meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone didn't always agree, but it was always a very open discussion and a friendly atmosphere.
And you didn't really have a problem getting volunteers to do anything either.
That was welcome, and it just helped make things happen.
Yeah, it did.
And I think the thing that always was kind of maybe surprising to a lot of people was some of the people that volunteered for that. Because you look out in the group and, gosh, you're kind of surprised that they're out there. Or, gosh, I didn't think of them being volunteer. But that in spirit, it came from the top. Pat was a great manager, and the board was just wonderful to work with. And we generated, through our funding and our dues, our membership donations, really ample funds to do whatever we wanted to. And we really didn't hitchhike much on it, but we did start a facade grant of if someone wanted to paint the front of their building, we would match up to $500. If the project was $1,500, we would take care of $500. If it was only $700, we'd take care of 50% of it. And some of the additional painting then that took place in downtown was brought about by that. It was later expanded to not just include painting, but it was awnings and
Well, one
repairs.
situation, we did a roof, I think, something with the roof, because if your roof's leaking, your
Everything's-
building's gonna be gone, so we helped with, we expanded a little as, beginning it was just for awnings or painting.
And then windows also, there were several
yes.
windows were replaced with
So
that.
that we did see that there was a different need and we could manage that. But
And there was usually a downtown holidays, I think we started
Yes.
with, was a lighted Christmas parade, which is
And-
still being done.
and the live windows
And the live
that we
window
did, that was
displays.
the Main Street project. And
And then also, Main Street, through the design committee, started it was the booths, decorating, lemonade stands.
oh yes, that was,
And it's moved into a patriotic type of thing now.
well,
But,
just for this year anyway.
yeah, but it was to involve the children.
Yes.
And they developed and built their own lemonade stand and then sold lemonade, and it was judged on sweetness and
Whoever.
there was a mayor's
Well,
choice.
the
all
people
different
that, yeah, and people bought tickets. And so then they put the tickets in
Sample.
this little bucket and then on buckets for each of the kids. And this year, I mean, it has grown, it's expanded.
Yeah.
This year they had 21.
I didn't know that many. We were out of
21
town.
this year. And,
That was always held on a band concert night too.
yes, and one of the stipulations was, I mean, you know, yes, they needed help from their parents, but their sign had to be hand done by a child, couldn't be computed. And they were rather interesting at times. And I know one of them, the grandma that was helping the grandchildren, two of them, and she was helping them, and they'd spelled lemonade wrong. And she had mentioned it to him, and it was kind of like, it's okay. So she decided it was okay too.
Well, at that event also, the Main Street Board, our volunteers, had a hot dog and hamburger fries
Yes.
for our public at a very nominal fee, but it was a little bit of a moneymaker too.
And they're still doing that.
Still doing it.
Still doing that.
So I guess some of the seeds we planted are still growing.
Yes, they are. 'Cause-
Well, Charlotte, it's been a delight reminiscing
Thank
about
you.
this.
It's
And
been fun.
it brings back a lot of old memories, and a lot of things took place back then.
Yes, we did.
And I guess we're still doing some of them.
And I think,
Thank you for your time and participation.
yeah.